Hello, I'm Bill Bavage. I'm a golf coach with the World Golf Teachers Federation, and today I'm going to present a review that I did on one of the books in our recommended reading list within our training materials, and it's Fearless Golf by Dr Gio Valiante. The book explains fear and how it can be a limiting factor that affects performance. This leads to underachievement. It feeds off our failures and escalates from there. An example in everyday life would be the human response to driving a car or flying in a plane. Both are potentially dangerous situations. However, most of us are able to control a car safely and get from A to B, or sit in a plane in a contraption that's travelling 30,000 feet above the ground. An explanation is provided and shows that confidence is the undefeated conqueror of fear, and it offers a form of defence and protection against fear itself. Success is also enabled by our focus on physical, mental, and emotional preparation. So, fear is a potential enemy. Humans often answer simple questions automatically without much thought. But alongside, there's also a visual interpretation. The foundation of fear is based on future uncertainty. Our human fight or flight response basically responds to threats or danger through our senses and uses our survival instinct. An example is given in the book and demonstrates that all humans experience fear. And this can lead to anxiety and nerves, which are never helpful when playing golf. But through awareness, questioning, understanding, and applying distractions, we can alleviate fear. Fear can be confronted through conscious decision. We can choose not to be afraid. So fear is basically a product of poor self-questioning and irrational thinking. There are two parts of our brain in operation. The cortex, which deals with our rational and conscious thoughts, and the amygdala, which is effectively a fear command centre. However, the amygdala operates instantaneously and is a switch that prevents rational thinking. Also, our eyes, our sight, our vision allow us to process additional information, and this can influence perception. So the importance of focus and concentration is paramount. An example when playing golf would be when you're putting. When you stand over the ball and you're focused on the ball itself, it shuts out any distractions elsewhere and can betray fear. We also have our memory to consider and the recall of any fearful experiences. The issue here is that these can be particularly vivid, and that's because our emotions and senses were alive at the time. There's also the anticipation of perceived threats, as this initiates our fear response. Because fear feeds itself and triggers a downward spiral, it attacks our self-efficacy and introduces tension, which is never helpful when playing golf. You can feel tension in a number of ways, and you can actually see it. You can feel it in your hands when you grip the club, the pressure applied. You can see it in the speed and fluidity of the movements. And you can see it at critical parts of the swing itself, in transition or impact, and deceleration in short shots and coming out of the shot. So this leads us to the question then, why do we play golf? The book presents two different approaches, mastery and ego. Mastery relates to a Japanese word, kaizen, which is defined as the intense, continuous, measured effort to improve. And there are examples of players in the golfing history who were good examples of masters at their skills. Ben Hogan, Jack Nicklaus, and Tiger Woods. The importance of where we place our focus and attention remains a priority, or we can create a distraction with purpose. Mastery-oriented motivation is all about learning and developing those skills to complete the task. The mastery approach is about hitting target-specific shots and adopting an effective routine. Mastery is all about focusing on playing the golf course itself one shot at a time and dismissing pretty much everything else. Psychological research has showed that mastery equals concentration, enjoyment, motivation and achievement, whereas ego-based approach is all about the perception by others of what we do, how we appear and how we perform. The ego approach is based on our performance, how others perceive it, and our attempts to try and avoid any sort of humiliation or embarrassment. The trouble with this approach is that it relies on success, so it's effectively doomed. A term that's used in golf is bounce back. Tiger Woods is a good example of someone who portrays these skills. This is the ability to deal with setbacks, a bad bounce, a bad shot, a bad score at a hole, and the ability to move on and restore that original higher level performance. This is seen as a learning opportunity, so we should treat obstacles as challenges in order to overcome them. That leads us on to self-efficacy. Our own individual perceptions and beliefs, our control of thoughts, our feelings and actions performed. The foundation for motivation supports our well-being and accomplishment, but it differs from self-esteem, which is considered to be emotional judgment. The higher self-efficacy we have, the less fear we're likely to encounter. There are two sources explained in the book: declarative, which is knowing that belief is necessary, and procedural, which is how to cultivate and nurture self-belief itself. Successful function involves accurate appraisal of our self-efficacy. That basically leads to confidence. The basis is that faith in our vision and our goals is that limits do not exist. Our perception and how we deal with challenges and obstacles is the key. It influences our resilience to deal with mistakes and disappointments, and allows us to learn how to succeed. It allows us to build and grow our confidence. We can push our limits and overcome the challenges. We can also set goals and expectations based on our motivation in order to progress and to reach higher standards. We should set goals that are high, but they need to remain specific and achievable. Success does strengthen self-efficacy. We can frame events and situations in a positive manner. An example in the book would be when Jack Nicklaus won the US Masters in 1986. Nicklaus had birdied the 9th, 10th and 11th hole in the final round, and he was in contention to win the tournament. However, at the infamous short par 3 12 at Amen Corner, he made a bogey, but he took time out to regroup and used the bogey as an incentive to refocus. And as most people probably know, and the history books show, Nicklaus went on to win another career major. Vicarious learning involves concentration. It's the player, yourself, versus the course, and it's about asking questions, but it's the right questions, like what is my target? Modelling is discussed in the book. How we see role models, tour players, our icons, our idols, and then also imitating those, playing with better players, creating benchmarks and standards to push ourselves. There's also the influence of verbal and social persuasion, our own self-talk, and also the influence of others, what they say, hear, and do. Our physiological and emotional state can influence confidence too, but there's an interpretation required because our nerves are separate from fear and they're emotionally overwhelmed. Nerves can be disruptive, but they can also be used to enhance our perception and to basically get more focused or psyched up. So creating self-efficacy, we should see shots exclusively and independently, focus is the key. We can practice to build confidence, but we should aim to control what we can. So, what questions should we ask? Well, another example in the book is a golfer called Frank. He appears to be able to play with no problem at all, successfully, and is almost invincible when it's a money match against his peers. However, whenever he puts a scorecard in his pocket, he really struggles. Eventually, after some research and investigation, Frank discovered that he'd been asking himself different questions in the two environments, and eventually he managed to make progress by applying what he had done successfully in the match play format. So, questions like what is my target, they're ideal, and avoid doubtful what ifs. This is basically your mastery approach versus ego. An example in the book is Jack Nicklaus, and questions he would ask himself when he was playing competitively. How am I going to win this tournament? Or how do I want to play this shot? These were questions that triggered his mind to come back with the right responses. The human mind often responds with visual imagery. These are questions to initiate further thought. Our preparation, our strategy, should also include questions. What obstacles am I likely to face here today? What challenges does the course hold? We need to stay in the present, ask the right questions. What is my target? That same question recurs throughout the book. We should avoid swing thoughts, distractions, and outcome-based attention. The attribution tripod is explained. This is personal, psychological, and equipment factors that we use to explain situations or events. The success and failure is also broken into three categories: stability, locus, and controllability. Stability is whether outcomes are stable or unstable. Locus, or whether those outcomes are internal, individual-based, or external due to other factors. It could be weather, course conditions, bad bounces, bad lies. And controllability is basically whether we can do anything about it or not. There's no black and white when it comes to attributions, and sometimes they're used as excuses. The right attributions are the correct ones. The human tendency is to offer a poor explanation in many cases, and this is done mainly to avoid anxiety or concern, but also to seek praise or comfort from others and justify themselves. There's numerous examples in the book, good and bad questions, events, scenarios, stories. There's one that stood out for me, and it's Tiger Woods, and it's quite simple. He would always be heard to say, keep it real. And that's all about understanding the facts and truly getting to the bottom of reasons why events have taken place. Habits are discussed in the book, and there's basically two forms: action-based habits and those of the mind. Our self-efficacy is based on our beliefs and attributions, and they form the habits of our thinking, and they influence our perception. But the fear response can be conditioned. If we give in to fear, then it just multiplies. But we can practice, and we can be sensitive to these habits. And awareness is required in order to develop our skills. Another good example in the book are practicing methods of two of the golfing greats. Jack Nicklaus often practiced, but realised that after so many shots, he realised that his practice was no longer constructive or productive. So he would recognise this, take time out, have a break, and come back after a rest. Ben Hogan was known to actually practice concentration techniques. So, what are my own thoughts having read this book? Well, I found the book fairly easy to read. It was pitched at a good level for understanding, even though it explains some of the psychological principles. The author was enthusiastic, clearly knowledgeable and experienced in his field, so that always helps. There was a number of good examples relating to golf, stories, analysis, etc., which was good. But I think there was a few points that I took as learnings. One was acceptance that fear is a natural human response. We have an inbuilt fight or flight instinct, and we're sensitive to danger or threats. There's also recognition of fear and nerves, and that they're two different things, because nerves can be misinterpreted as fear, and they can be emotionally driven. Also, confidence can be a shield against fear, and it's based on your own self-efficacy, and this can be improved as a defense. The reference to the Japanese term Kaizen and mastery approach is important, and that's really what we need to adopt. It's all about continuous improvement, learn and improve, a cyclic process. Focus and concentration is all about the detail. It's about seeing the golf course, absorbing information. It's about asking all the right questions. What is my target? It's about influencing what you can control. So ask yourself good questions. Why do I play golf? What is my target? And avoid self-criticism. Finally, there's a section at the end of the book where the author provides some feedback himself. He highlights that the reader's assumption might be that this is common sense, but he also says that common sense is not always common practice. Our perceptions as individuals differ, and the content contains suggestions, not any formalised rules or principles. There's no formula for individual greatness. So basically the book is a starting point to help you find solutions. I hope you'll go and read this. I certainly found it helpful, and I'll keep it on my bookshelf for future reference. If you're going to read it, I hope you enjoy it. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.